Free spirits, welcome back to another episode of Flying Upstream podcast, where we celebrate the beauty of the unconventional and of those who dare to forge their own path. Today on the podcast, we're honored to have a guest whose journey has led her to the path of teaching us all something essential to a life well lived: self love.
That's right, Louisa. Today with us is Ms. DaShay Carter. She's a mother of two, a full-time psychology student, a business owner, and a podcasting model. She teaches the art of self-love by sharing the ups and downs of her story. She advocates for real bodies and total body acceptance through her modeling and is here to continue her mission to help others unlock their self-love. To our listeners, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to DaShay. Welcome to the Flying Upstream podcast.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, and I love the name of the podcast. It's one of the things that like I kind of encourage other people to do too. So it's so awesome. The alignment.
Yes, alignment. Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so DaShay, everything we know about you is really interesting, and I want to just jump right in to learn more about your journey. What did you do? What led you to be on the path that you're on today, this unconventional path? And what story helped change your entire life? What did you learn from all that?
Well, what led me to this point is life. Like I was I feel like I really started on this journey. It started long before, but I wasn't actively consciously making changes in my life till it hit like it was 2021 after COVID, and I was triggered, and I had to let go of a friend from high school, and I was having troubles in my previous marriage. And so I was like, okay, I need like my people are not here for me anymore. So I need to be here for myself. I have two kids depending on me. I need to figure out something. So that was the step that I took to dive into getting therapy, talk therapy. And that was like my biggest, like, okay, I need help. It's okay to ask for help. Let me get some help. And I think that after that, like things just took off from there. As me studying therapy, I knew that I had to share, I had to allow myself to be vulnerable. And even though I was very open with my therapist, I was still like hiding stuff.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that was like my biggest step. That was the most transformational thing, choice that I could have done that got me here for sure.
What transpired? So, with studying therapy and, kind of being aware from that perspective, but kind of for listeners, is there something that transpired that for you made you realize, like, I have to start being fully open with my therapist? Like, I have to be so open. That is the only way that I'm going to be able to break this mold and to be able to
Yeah,
break free. Was there something that, like,
there was, because I had made up in my mind that I would never have a successful, loving relationship if I did not heal. And at the time, I was thinking about a relationship with someone else. I was thinking about, I'm never going to have that mate. I'm never going to have someone to grow old with, and all of this. And I was like, I have to heal. And so I was literally working for love. At the time, I didn't realize that I was working for self-love. You know, I thought I was working to be tied to someone, because I mean, we want to be tied to someone, but we can't really fully achieve that level of relationship. The one that I embody, the one that I admire, that I want, that I'm growing towards, until you fully love and accept yourself, because also you end up choosing the wrong people when you don't accept things about yourself. And self-acceptance is a big part of self-love. And so I was like, DaShay, you have to take this seriously, because you want to be loved And you can't do that if you're carrying all this baggage from that relationship and childhood and your relationship with your parents and your relationship with your family. Like, you cannot do that. And so that was my moment. And it was like, I want to say 2022. I was like, okay, like that was when I was like, because I love psychology, so I also read psychology books, but because I'm like a deep thinker and I'm, aiming for psychology, they end up being self-help books. So doing that plus doing therapy, like I would go on these spirals and I would have like a list of things to fix. And I met this woman, and I don't know, you guys may have heard of her. Her name is Says What She Wants, and she's such a powerful speaker. And she gave me this message, and she didn't know me at the time, and she said, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Stop trying to fix yourself. And it just hit home for me because, like I said, she didn't know me. She didn't know my situation. She didn't know anything. And I was like, damn, you really are trying to fix yourself. You really are trying to, be all like, make yourself this perfect little human being so that you can be worthy of love, not knowing that I was already worthy of love, so.
That's such a great point, actually, because I think there is a fine line between fixing yourself, which implies you're trying to be somebody else, you're trying to change yourself, and as you said, you don't accept who you really are, and peeling back the layers of trauma and grief, shame, anger, and healing from that. And it can feel like you're changing yourself, but in reality, you're really healing from stuff.
Exactly.
And going towards self-love and self-acceptance, right? There's a really fine line there. So thanks for bringing that up. I love your point about there's nothing wrong with you. You're great as you are. Right? I think that's a really important message for everyone to hear. And DaShay, I'm really curious, what inspired you to create the platform that you did that changes and challenges traditional beauty standards and trying to empower others to love their bodies?
For me, it was when I learned to accept myself and accept some things about me, because growing up, I was always what they call it, like she's top heavy, she's full. Like, I remember I had hips in middle school and my sister was terrified because I had stretch marks, and she was like, Mom, because she thought only pregnant women had stretch marks, and I am in middle school and I have them on my calves and on my hips because I have hips, and I had breasts, and so it was something that I tucked away. And I was a praise dancer in church, and my hips did what they wanted, and to them it was provocative, and so it was something that I hid for a long time. And then my trauma kind of contributed to that, because I have a trauma of sexual abuse from childhood, and it carried up into high school. And so even that made me shameful of my body. Like, no, if there's no attention drawn to me, then I'll be safe, And so I had that like illusion in my mind. And so I know I'm not the only one. I hear it in music, I see it. And so that's kind of like where my podcast name came from. That's where everything came from, because there's these different imbalances. There's these different things that society says we should look like, or this or that or whatever. And so that's where Beautifully Imbalanced came from, because it was a way for me to accept every little thing that society rejects, every little thing like that other people have rejected about me that I actually love about myself, but I rejected it because there were so many people that rejected those parts of me. And so that's where, for me, the term Beautifully Imbalanced came from, because there's me accepting all these parts of me, my mental health, my trauma, my body. And then there's also, my health conditions, and things like that. It's me embracing all of that and encouraging other people to embrace it, because the biggest thing is for you to love that part of you. And if you find people that don't accept those parts of you, then you know that those are not the right people. But the problem is we usually don't accept those parts of ourselves, and we're expecting other people to. So when they don't, we just let me just tweak this here. And so we end up like shrinking till we don't even recognize ourselves anymore. And that was like a big thing for me. I didn't recognize who I was, and I was like, okay, no, I gotta get back to DaShay.
I love that. I love that. And it's so true, right? Especially when, like you mentioned earlier, it happens that a lot of us are taught to look for love outside of ourselves. Like, I don't ever remember growing up and having the idea that I needed to love myself in order to, to anything. It was always like, go seek that love elsewhere. Seek it from your parents, seek it from your friends, seek it from, significant others. But the truth and in reality, and I do a lot of energy work. And so in reality, it's like you are attracting what you are. And what you are essentially is like desperately seeking this love outside of yourself. So you're attracting others who are seeking it outside of themselves too. So now we have two people who don't fully love themselves trying to love each other. And that's, I mean, we know what happens, right? It's like this big mess of just people not even knowing themselves, because that's one of the things, in the self-love journey that I learned myself too, is like you need to first, like, it's like self-knowledge, self-acceptance, and then you like love yourself finally. You're like, okay, here are all the pieces of me. And I know that a lot of us struggle with that. What would you say to someone who is struggling to break free from the societal pressures, because that's huge, um, that are telling them to look for love outside of themselves, that are telling them to go seek all of these things outside of themselves, when in reality, it's like you need to start at home. You need to
Yeah.
start here. What would you recommend to them?
Yeah. The biggest thing is I do try to remind people that we're taught that self-love is selfish because we're putting ourselves first. And so I try to like just kind of put it out there, like, so this, like, plant the seed that it's not a selfish thing, and that when you enter into these relationships, like you said, they end up being codependent. So you're not really um you're not really like living this life together. Like your life's like morph into one, and you don't know who you are, and you stop doing the things you enjoy. And so I encourage people to reflect. So one, it's not selfish. Two, reflect. How did you feel the last time you made those decisions? Did it feel good? No. So let's see what we can do to elevate that. And so for me, affirmations have been huge, to the point where like I literally wear them. Like I wear them. That's kind of, that's why when I mean it, my journey started before therapy with affirmations. I put them on my shirts. They started before that, but however you can get those affirmations inside of you. And affirmation, at first they were very like very universal. Now they're very specific. I have the courage to heal. I have the courage to be myself. I have the courage to love. I have the courage to love myself, respect myself. And so I make them as specific as I can. And it changes my mind. It changes how I view myself, because a lot of times we're viewing ourselves through the lenses of society, our friends, our family, social media, things like that. And so it changes my perspective on how I view myself. It gets me out of that box that I put myself in, that I allowed myself to be put in. And it also changes the way I communicate with myself, because sometimes I found that we communicate with ourselves in ways that we would never talk to other people. Never talk to other people. And sometimes it spills out and we talk to other people in a way, and it's like, you can hear it. It's that this is how that person communicates with themselves. And so that's something that needs to be tweaked. So affirmations are powerful. A lot of people I have found, they're like, oh, it doesn't work for me. I'm like, it's because you got to find the right one, and you got to be consistent. And so that is, to me, that's the biggest gift that I received on my journey with me loving and accepting myself. Because when you hear yourself say these positive things about yourself, it is just so beautiful, especially because some of the stuff is stuff that we have never heard from anybody. You know what I mean? Or we've heard it, but we didn't believe it because the noise of society is so strong. And so we have to find a way to make our voice bigger than those noises. Affirmations are the way to do that.
I love that.
That's amazing. I feel like I'm just letting that sink in for a second. So great. So you mentioned you're a mother of two, and Louisa and I are both parents as well, with each two kids as well.
Oh.
And
Yes.
curious to know how your journey has impacted how you parent. And I know I heard somewhere along the way that the voice in our head, that mean voice that tells us we're not good enough, or we need, all the things that are not kind, actually comes from our parents. And so I'm curious to know, what are some of the things that you do that may be considered sort of against the grain or different in the way that you parent your children? And what has that journey been like for you?
Yeah. So I grew up. I've always worked with kids, and I've always worked in the psychology field and then in child development. And so I knew that I wanted to parent differently than the way my mother parented me. And I also, just growing up with her as my mom as a parent, I was like, I'm doing something different. But what transformed a lot for me was I was watching this video on gentle parenting on TikTok, and she was saying that our trauma is parenting our children, and that was, we were, like with we're not going to dive into spanking, but basically that's what it is. Our parents did that to us, so now we're doing that to our kids, but it doesn't really help them. It's really more like you're working your frustrations out on a child. And so it was like a lot of that stuff, and I let it sink in. And as I began to heal, I really thought about how I wanted to be treated and how I wanted to be heard as a child. And so I allow my kids, that's one of the big things, is allowing them to speak up. And my kids are like me. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. They're very sassy, and they and they speak their mind, and I encourage it because I feel like that's something that gets taken away from us, and it messes up our relationships because we're not fully honest with one another, or we're not fully honest with ourselves because we've been doing it for so long. And so I may like say, okay, maybe this is the way you can say it to where I can receive it better, but I do allow them to speak their mind, which is rare. I feel like even like when I take them around other people, there's like certain words like asking why in our culture is like because I said so, you know what I mean? And so I allow my kids to ask why. I allow them to say what. I allow them to say, huh, and stuff like that. And just be human, because we always I feel like that's the other thing that bothered me with parenting is like, we'll be like, say thank you, say this, say that. And we don't even do that all the time. So we're putting all these pressures on these kids to be some type of way, and we're not even that way. You know what I mean? Like, we don't say thank you all the time. We might smile and nod or whatever. But we're not saying thank you all the time. You know what I mean? We're not always saying excuse me after we burp. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're putting all these pressures on the kids. They've already got the lesson, but they also are watching us. So now here we are being these examples, and then we're mad at them for doing what we're doing. So that's the biggest thing for me, is to let them be human. And like, if I make a mistake, I let them know, mommy made a mistake, I said this and I should have said it in this way, or I was frustrated and I shouldn't have had that conversation with you at that time because I was frustrated. I should have taken space. And so they know those terms, like I need space, I need private time, those kind of things. So excuse me. So that's kind of how I parent. It's challenging, but it works.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I love what you're sharing because I too come from a background where it was very much, I grew up, I call it like a be seen, not heard sort of thing, and be seen only when it was okay to be seen, like not all the time. um, and the power that we give to our children, because I too parent, my kids ask a lot of whys, say a lot of no's to like things that, I'm like, I don't want you to say no. But what I feel like with what you're sharing and the way that my own experience, my own parenting experience is what it does, it opens up the door for them to learn to be authentic. It opens up the door for them to be able to learn to express themselves, for them to be able to learn to evaluate themselves and kind of be able to reflect, because you're sharing your experiences with them. Like mommy should have taken a moment. It's like you're showing them that you're human, and in turn they're going to internalize that and be like, I'm sorry, that's my dog, she wants to be on the show today.
Hey, Luna.
Yeah, she sees a squirrel outside and she wants to go chase it. um and so there's so much power in that, because I feel like that part of that self-love journey starts, like we mentioned, with our ability to see ourselves, to accept ourselves. But if we have to kind of do the work that we kind of go back and learn who we are, it's not that it's impossible, right? We've all done it. A lot of us have done that work, and it's very painful and it's been very fruitful. But I feel like we're giving them a head start. We give our kids a head start without having to go backward and learn themselves. Now they can just learn on acceptance, because all of the societal stuff that gets put on them as they grow up, that's out of our control. um, so thank you so much for sharing that. I think this is very helpful to our listeners. And to our listeners, if you're listening or watching, don't forget to hit the like button. Be sure to follow and subscribe. And DaShay, I have a question. Do you provide resources or support for your audience, for our listeners, to help them navigate through their own self-love journeys?
I do actually. I have my podcast. So on my podcast, Beautifully in Balance, I'm very raw about my story, my experiences, and I just share what I'm going through, and then I also share ways that I healed through it, and I give multiple ways because I know that what works for me may not work for you, or you may not be open to trying that until you hear about it a couple of times. So that's what I do on my podcast, but then over on my Patreon account, that's the community that I'm building for all of us to just be in there and heal together while we heal individually. So in there, I provide affirmations, I provide chats for us to talk about specific topics. Any resources that have helped me, like books or like personality quizzes or attachment style quizzes, like those kind of things, they all go in there. And then I have my clothing brand, which is just the affirmations. Like I always tell people, you start with the clothing brand because that's the affirmations that kind of kickstarts your healing. And then you go over to my podcast and you hear like how I talk to myself and how I talk to you guys. And then that's when you join the community and you're like, okay, let's heal. Like this is where we do the work and let's go. You can go in whatever order you want, but that's how I always envision it, because a lot of people will see the affirmations and they're like, oh my goodness, that fits. And they're vague enough to apply to everyone. Like this one is big. And for me, it's because I shrunk myself for so many years and so many relationships. And so big, you know, but for some other people, it's like that, maybe to be more vocal. Maybe it's not like because they shrunk themselves. Maybe it's just because they hold another form of shrinking, but they hold their tongue a little too much. But they're still who they are. They just like cut back on saying certain stuff. You know what I mean? So, those are the resources that I provide. And I was doing monthly challenges for unlocking your self-love, but uh, it was challenging for me to be present in that area as well as working on the stuff that I'm currently working on in my self-love journey. So I decided to go back to my original plan and creating a workbook. So it'll be an Unlock Your Self-Love workbook with 12 challenges in there for you to work through unlocking your self-love at your own pace.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. For anyone who's listening right now, definitely check out DaShay's clothing, her community. It's amazing. It's really, really inspiring. So make sure you check all that out. Okay, now for the big question, DaShay. Are you ready? Okay. We want to know, what was the exact moment that you decided it was time to fly upstream?
The exact moment. I'm going to say towards the end of last year, I had the opportunity to host the red carpet of a modeling conference. And after that, it was just, I just blew myself away. Like, I knew I could do it. But once I did it, and the coordinator, photographer, coach, model coach, he was very pleased to the point where he asked me to host the show, but I didn't know him enough to introduce him because we had just met. And just that confirmation that I could do this, that I could model, that I could host the red carpet, that I could actually start living out my dreams. It was just that was everything for me. So after that, I was like, I am going to be fully committed to myself. I'm going to commit to myself the way I committed to all these other people, the way I committed to these relationships that didn't get me anywhere, but lessons that I needed. But so that was the moment that I was like, I'm going to be totally committed to me. And I hit the ground running. I took his modeling course. It was a struggle. Okay. Cause I wasn't working at the time. So I was like donating plasma and, and, doing virtual assistant on the side. And I was riding the train out to Sacramento. It's an hour away from where I live in Vallejo. And so I was riding the train out there, Ubering to class, doing what I needed to show up for me, to work on the skills that I needed to work on to break through, get my self-confidence at another level so that I can be a successful model, so that I can be a successful role model, so that I can reach these different platforms that are only going to help other people unlock their self-love. And so that was like, for me, that was my upstream, that was my transformation. Though it started last year, and I'm excited that this year I also get to host the red carpet again. And so I'm very excited for that. It's happening in October, and I'm also graduating from the modeling course. So I'm very excited for all these opportunities.
That is mind-blowingly amazing. Congratulations, honestly.
Thank you.
That is beyond our imagination, right? Like I'm sure you didn't wake up, especially as a kid, and we're like, I'm going to be able to host a red carpet. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I really hope that for everyone listening, everyone watching, that everyone can take away a piece of this. This is so inspiring, right? This is the power of self-love. This is the power of choosing yourself. This is the power of pouring into yourself, of going against the grain, of walking that untraditional path and just creating your own gosh darn path. It is yours to create, it is yours to cultivate. And listeners, I hope that you are able to do the same. DaShay, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us today.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
Of course.
Thank you. All right, free spirits, make sure to check out the links in the show notes in the description if you're watching on YouTube. Don't forget to like, follow, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss